Okay, welcome back. Today's lecture for APP 101 will be the nervous system. The nervous system is the body's communication and control center. It regulates bodily processes to maintain homeostasis, and it's integral to massage and soft tissue function, which is why it's important for massage therapy for us to understand it. Talking about the nervous system tissues again, just a brief overview or review was the neuron, that's the nerve cell. Again, it's the basic unit of the nervous system. And then the neuroglia, those were the supportive cells. So with the neuron, we have the body, which is the main portion. It contains the nucleus and other organelles. We have the dendrites. Those are the highly branched, get that out of the way, tree-like fibers. They receive and conduct information to the cell body. And then the axon, that was that long single fiber with branched ends at the bottom, the axon terminals. These conduct impulses away from the cell body to other structures, so to the muscle or to other neurons. And there's a video. I'll let you go watch the video, first one. There's going to be several in this section. Pause here and let you go watch that, and then you can come back. Okay, so then just a recap. This is your cell body, your dendrites, the axon, and the axon terminals. And your axon can be covered with the myelinated sheath, or it cannot be. It doesn't have to be. It's just a matter of whether or not the Schwann cells wrap around it to create that myelin sheath or not. So a Schwann cell is actually a type of neuroglia, so it's an accessory cell. It's considered to be the glue that holds the brain together. Glia is Greek for glue. With the neuroglia, you have five different types of cells. The first up is astrocytes. These are called star cells, or they look like stars or starbursts. If you look on page 106, you have a picture there at the top of the astrocyte. These cells support and anchor nerve cells to capillaries. They're the most common form of the neuroglia cell, and they maintain chemical concentrations, specifically potassium and glycogen. They remove waste, they maintain the blood-brain barrier, and they stimulate ogliodendrocytes. And we'll cover the ogliodendrocytes in a second. Next up is the ependymal cells. If you see on 106, your third picture, that is a picture of the ependymal cells. These cells line the cavities of the brain and the spinal cord, and they circulate the cerebral spinal fluid. See how it has the little hair-like structures on it? That's what kind of helps to move the cerebral spinal fluid along. Then we have the microglia. This is your second picture. I'm not sure why they have them out of order, but the microglia is the second picture. This is it's a type of phagocyte that consumes cellular debris. It's also important with the immune defense. Then we have those ogliodendrocytes. This is fatty cells that wrap around nerves in the central nervous system to create the myelin sheath for insulation. They're smaller than the astrocytes. There's fewer of them, and they have fewer and slender processes than the astrocytes. But they can actually cover 50 axons at a time. Then finally we have Schwann cells. These are the ones that we saw along the axon of the nerve cell of the neuron itself. This is what forms the myelin around the nerve cell, and it's in the peripheral nervous system. and it can only wrap on one axon at a time. So with that, we have 4 videos for you to go watch. I'll let you watch those, and then we'll come back and continue on. Okay, so this is just another picture of the different neuroglia. You've got the microglia here. You've got the ogliodendrocytes. You've got, these are your neurons. For this to be an ogliodendrocyte, this has to be within the brain and spinal cord. You've got the astrocyte, and they said the astrocyte's what binds the capillary to the nerve, or the neuron, sorry. And up next we have a picture of single Schwann cell wrapping around the axons. Then we go into the nervous tissue organization. We have in the central nervous system, we have neurons bundled together as nerve tracts. In the peripheral nervous system, their neuronal cell bodies are grouped together to form ganglia, and axons are grouped together to form a nerve. We have the nerve, since the nerve has a structure similar to that of a muscle, with bundles of axons wrapped in connective tissue that are bundled together with blood vessels and more connective tissue. So each neuron is wrapped with connective tissue covering called the endoneurium, just like with the muscle cell it was the endomysium. This with the nervous system is the endoneurium that wraps the individual neuron. Then we take groups of those neurons and bundle them together and create a fossicle. And then we wrap that fossicle in the perineurium. And then we take groups of fossicles and bundle those together and add blood vessels to create a nerve. And we wrap the nerve with the epineurium. So it's really similar soundings because it's what we just studied with the muscular system. Now we had the endomysium that wrapped the muscle cell. We had the fossicle, which was bundles of muscle cells. We had the perimysium, which was what was wrapped around the fossicle. And then we had the actual muscle, which was bundles of the fossicles with blood vessels. And then we had the epimysium wrapping around the muscle itself. So same thing, but now we're just dealing with nerves. So instead of mysium, we replace it with neurium. So again, this is just showing the endoneurium, the perineurium, and the epineurium. Okay, so now moving on down on the page on 106, down at the bottom, it talks about nerve plexuses, or nerve plexi. These are large networks of intertwined nerves. There's 4 major ones. There's cervical, the brachial, the lumbar, and the sacral. With massage therapy, it's important to avoid during your massage, or at least use caution and only approach these plexus with proper training. Okay, this is your picture diagram of the cervical plexus. See here how all the nerves, all these yellow fibers branching out, these are nerves. These are the cervical nerve plexus, so it's just a bunch of intertwined nerve fibers that form a plexus. And then here is your view on your cadaver. And these are the nerves. Next is the brachial plexus. This is the same thing. It's just a little further down on the neck. It comes out and it actually runs under the clavicle, between the clavicle and the first rib, and then down the arm all the way down to the fingertips. And again, this is your brachial plexus on your cadaver. And we have the lumbar plexus. This branches off from the lumbar region, runs down the leg. And then finally the sacral plexus branches out of the sacrum, runs all the way down the back of the leg to the toe, or to the bottom of the foot at least. This big massive nerve here is the sciatic nerve. It is the longest nerve in the body. People who have sciatica, you'll deal with a lot of those, or pseudo-sciatica, which is false sciatica. You'll be working with clients working on this area. You see here, this is the sciatic nerve, this big one here, branching out from under the piriformis muscle. I mentioned pseudo-sciatica. True sciatica is where the sciatic nerve is compressed at the sacrum with the bone. Pseudo-sciatica is where this piriformis muscle that the sciatic nerve runs underneath, it gets inflamed and compresses the sciatic nerve. And you'll learn more about the difference in the two in upcoming lectures. Okay, so now we go into classification by function. Excuse me. Okay, so there's many types of nerves that monitor, integrate, and respond to external and internal stimuli and changes occurring within the body. The functional classes of nerve cells separate them into two separate groups. You have the sensory or afferent neurons and the motor or efferent neurons. Your sensory neurons or afferent neurons send signals to the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, in response to a stimuli. So it's kind of like when you touch a hot stove, it sends the message up to the brain and spinal cord. And then there it processes it, and then it'll send the message back through the motor or efferent neuron. And it'll tell the muscle to contract and pull away from the hot stove. Within the sensory neurons, you have proprioceptors, exteroceptors, and interoceptors. The proprioceptors are sensory nerve cells sensitive in the body's position, the muscle tone, and equilibrium. They're located in muscles, tendons, joints, and the inner ear. Then you have exteroceptors. They respond to stimuli from the external environment, excuse me, such as touch, pressure, temperature, smell, sight, and hearing. They're found mostly in the skin and near the surface of the body. And then finally, interoceptors. These are also called visceroceptors. These detect stimulus such as pressure within the organs and the blood vessels. For our purposes, we're going to be dealing primarily with proprioceptors and exteroceptors. It says in the muscle spindles are complex proprioceptors that are sensitive to the length of the muscle fibers and respond to changes in that length. Between the collagen fibers in the tendons are Golgi tendon organs that respond to tension within the tendon that results from muscle contraction. Both muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs provide information to the central nervous system regarding the length and tension of the muscle and its tendon. Within a joint capsule, you have Ruffini end organs and Pacinian corpuscles. Both respond to pressure within the joint, and they are essentially sensing the position of the joint by sensing the different amounts of pressure at different places. So you have the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs that respond as muscles move through the joint in its range of motion. But the joint proprioceptors are active when the joint is at the ends of its range. All these work as a group to provide a sense of joint position, body position, effort, heaviness, and timing of movement. Input from these proprioceptors, along with input from other sensory organs, such as the eyes and the equilibrium sensors, is sometimes called kinesthetic sense. Manipulating muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs with advanced massage techniques can encourage the muscles to shorten or lengthen. And we'll learn more about that as chapters come. It says the free nerve endings, also called nociceptors, are located in the lower layer of the epidermis. They detect pain and temperature. Merkel cells found in the lower layer of the epidermis detect very light touch. Messener's corpuscles are found in the upper part of the dermis, in the lips, the hands, the feet, and the genital organs. Detect very light touch also. The Ruffini end organs, located in the dermis, detect heat and strong or continuous pressure. And then the Pacinian corpuscles, found in the deep dermis, sense the vibrations. So next up we have the motor neurons, or the efferent neurons. These are what we said sends signals from the brain and spinal cord to create the bodily response, to cause the muscle to contract. Then you have the mixed nerves. Mixed nerves, and the sciatic nerve, we mentioned it. That's an example of a mixed nerve. It has both sensory and motor nerve cells. So it can kind of monitor for input, integrate the information received, and then stimulate the body to respond, all with one cell. And then this gives you a diagram again of the skin over here, and it's sending the message to the central nervous system through the sensory nerve, or the afferent nerve. Then your brain will interpret that, and it will send it back from the central nervous system, which is your brain and spinal cord, along the motor nerve, or the afferent nerve, back to the muscle, the organ, or the gland, to create that response. Now this is just showing you pictures of the Golgi tendon organ and the sensory nerve, how it kind of intertwines there. And over here is the muscle spindle with the sensory nerve. And these are responsible for, they're going to protect the muscle tendon from tearing, and we talk about that later on in kinesiology. Okay, next up is irritability. So with irritability, this is a form of a nerve impulse. You have irritability and also conductivity. A neuron's irritability allows it to respond to a stimulus and translate that perception into a nerve impulse. And then its conductivity allows it to communicate that nerve impulse to another neuron, a muscle, or a gland. So with irritability, it allows response to stimulus. It translates perception to a nerve impulse. And it does so through what we call action potential, which is the actual nerve impulse. So the action potential, or the nerve impulse, has 4 stages. It has a resting stage, an excitation stage, depolarization stage, and a repolarization stage. And then it kind of just repeats itself again. So first up, the resting stage. This is where the nerve membrane is at rest in a polarized state, meaning that the positive and negative charges on either side are not balanced. Then you have excitation. This is when the thorn is perceived by pain receptor, and a neurotransmitter chemical is usually released to alter the permeability of the membrane. Then you have the depolarization stage. So this is where the membrane becomes more permeable to sodium, and they diffuse into the cell, rushing from the high sodium concentration outside to the low sodium concentration inside. With the extra supplied sodium inside the cell, the membrane becomes depolarized, meaning it has neither a negative or a balanced charge. Sorry, that it is the negative and positive charges on either side of the membrane are balanced. So it still has a charge, it's just a balanced out charge. And then, so basically they cancel each other out. Then you have the repolarization. So after the sodium gets inside, the permeability of the membrane reverts. So that keeps any more sodium from coming in. So the cell membrane then becomes more permeable to potassium, which quickly rushes out of the cell, restoring the positive charge to the outside and the negative charge to the inside. The sodium-potassium pump uses ATP to move sodium ions out and potassium ions in to maintain the sodium-potassium gradient necessary for the resting state. And then it kind of just picks back up with the resting state and repeats itself. So here's another video for you to go watch. And we'll pause for a few minutes and let you do that. And we'll come back and continue on. Okay, so if you're watching that video, that should help you out a little bit more, make things a little more clear for you. So next up we're going to talk about is the conductivity portion of the nerve impulses. Remember we had the irritability, and now we have conductivity. So this if the electrical impulse at the end of the axon is strong enough, the impulse will be conducted from one neuron to another neuron, or an effector, which we said was the muscle, the organ, or a gland. The impulses are conducted in a tiny but active gap called a synapse. We talked about that briefly when we were talking about tissues. The synapse is the gap between the neurons. And then says that the nerve cell that needs to transmit the impulse is called the presynaptic cell, and the cell that will receive is called the postsynaptic cell. So the axon terminal triggers a release of neurotransmitters for the presynaptic, and then the postsynaptic cell, which is typically the dendrite, is going to receive the neurotransmitter and start that impulse. The neurotransmitter release, it releases over 30 different types of hormones. The main ones are epinephrine, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine. Okay, next we're talking about nervous system organization. There's two categories, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Basically, the central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord, shown here, and the peripheral nervous system is everything else. So the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, there's reflex arcs or specific nerve cell paths. They're controlled by the spinal cord. And then we've got a couple more videos. This one is first one is on the stretch reflex. Second one will be on the tendon reflex. The third is the flexor reflex. Before we watch those, we have ventricles. These are cavities that produce cerebral spinal fluid. And we have meninges, which are 3 layers of connective tissue coverings. And we'll pause here and let you go watch those 3 videos and then come back. These are the 3 layers of the meninges, the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. Okay, so now we'll talk about the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system, we said, basically is everything outside of the central nervous system, so everything other than the brain and the spinal cord. It transmits information to and from the central nervous system, and its functions can be separated into involuntary and voluntary activities. So again, this is central nervous system, this is peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system is divided into 2 groups, somatic and autonomic nervous systems. So the somatic nervous system is the one we'll talk about first. It controls the voluntary skeletal muscle contractions. It has neurological memory. Goes to the saying, practice makes perfect. This is the basis for neurological memory. Repetition of a movement or holding the body's position in space reinforces the body's ability to produce that movement or position over time. Reinforcement of the nerve tracts occur with repetition. Okay, this is the somatic of the somatic nervous system, which provides the conscious and subconscious control over skeletal muscles. And then the somatic of the autonomic nervous system, which controls visceral functions largely outside our awareness. Okay, so autonomic nervous system, over on page 116 now. This controls the smooth and cardiac muscles, organs, and the glands. It has little or no conscious effort. Again, thank goodness, or we would forget to make our heart beat or forget to breathe, and we would be in serious trouble. There's 2 subgroups of the autonomic nervous system. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. These are 2 subgroups of autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is simply your fight or flight group. This is what happens whenever you sense danger. The body kicks into overdrive. You get that extra rush of adrenaline. When stimulated, the sympathetic nervous system affects many structures and organs, preparing them for emergency situation. For example, the heart pumps faster to provide more oxygen. The skeletal muscles contract. The pupil of the eyes dilate to allow more light in. The sweat glands are stimulated to perspire. And the digestive activity slows down. Then you have the parasympathetic nervous system. This stage is considered the rest and digest stage. Says it is the relaxing restorative division of the autonomic nervous system. sometimes referred to as the craniosacral system because the motor pathways arise from the cranial nerves and the sacral portions of the spine. Primary neurotransmitter of the parasympathetic nervous system is acetylcholine. When parasympathetic nerves are triggered, the organs and glands have a response opposite of the sympathetic. The heart slows down, skeletal muscles relax, pupils constrict, sweat glands are not active, and normal digestion occurs. So whenever we're doing a massage, which evokes the parasympathetic nervous system, it encourages the body to slow down and rest and start digestion. And a lot of times when you're doing a massage on someone, your client's stomachs will start growling. It usually tends to embarrass them. Just let them know it's just a normal part of the parasympathetic nervous system. It's a part of relaxation. It's normal. Okay, so this is a diagram of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So it gives you side-by-side comparison of what's going on. So with the parasympathetic, we said the pupils constrict, salivary glands stimulate, the heart slows down, the lungs constrict, the stomach begins digestion, the liver stimulates the bile release, the intestines stimulate peristalsis and secretion, and then the bladder contracts. So then when you get to sympathetic, so when feel like we're in danger or we're stressed, our pupils dilate, the salivary glands are inhibited, the heart rate increases. Well, go back. Sorry. I can get it to go back. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see. Let's move this out of the way. Sorry about that. Anybody dizzy yet? Okay, so where were we? The heartbeat increases, the lungs dilate, so breathing is easier. Digestion is inhibited. The liver produces glucose release, gives us more energy, more rush. The kidneys stimulate epinephrine and norepinephrine release, which again gives us more energy. The intestine, it inhibits the peristalsis and secretion, so it slows down digestion or halts digestion. And then the bladder relaxes. Okay, effects of massage on the nervous system. Massage elicits the parasympathetic response. It increases dopamine. It increases endorphins, the body's natural painkillers. It increases enkephalins. I'm not saying that right. Anyway, we'll go on. It increases oxytocin. It increases serotonin. Decreases cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and decreases substance P, which is linked to pain. Okay, so this is some endangerment sites of massage. So we're over on pathology portion now. So flip over to page 240 in your textbook. So endangerment sites are places on the body where the nerves and blood vessels are not well protected by muscles or bones. These sites are not pathological conditions, but you should be aware of their locations. Continuous, direct, or heavy pressure or pounding on any of the endangerment sites may cause damage and is contraindicated. Now make sure you're familiar with each of these sites. You also have the picture in your textbook on page 241. Okay, I think our slides are a little bit out of order here. I was kind of wondering why we skipped over the functions of the nervous system. Okay, so back to page 117. We'll finish up with the anatomy portion. Functions of the nervous system. There's 3 different responsibilities for the nervous system. It's going to be to monitor, to integrate, and to respond. It monitors by detecting changes that occur within or outside of the body. It integrates by processing signals for an appropriate response, and it responds by activating that appropriate response. Okay, so again, make your chart or your presentation including the major components of the nervous system, the functions of the nervous system, and the effects of massage on the nervous system. And now back to the pathology portion. So back over to page 240. So we talked about endangerment sites already. Now we're talking about sciatica. And I mentioned sciatica earlier when we were talking about the nerve plexus, the sacral plexus specifically. Manifestations of sciatica include aching or cramping sensations and or shooting or burning pain in the butt and down the leg into the foot. Contraindications locally in true sciatica if it stems from the spinal cord or nerve root. If it's pseudo-sciatica, you do want to get in there into that area and work it, but typically you need to know from the doctor whether it is true sciatica or pseudo-sciatica or piriformis syndrome. Indications: massage is going to relax the problematic muscle tissue and relieves pressure on the nerve if muscular cause exists. So if it is piriformis syndrome or pseudo-sciatica, then we're going to get in there and work that and relax that muscle and relieve the problem. If it's not muscular, then the massage is not going to help. It is bone, so it's going to have to require a doctor, specifically a surgeon. The etiology, the cause of sciatica, is irritation to the sciatic nerve at or near its root. And treatments include massage, muscle relaxers, pain meds, physical therapy, traction, cortisone injections, chiropractic or osteopathic adjustments, or surgery. So here I want you to pause and write a short paper describing the difference between true sciatica and pseudo-sciatica. I want you to include the definitions, the causes, and the treatments for each. And then you will email that to me at the end of this lesson. Okay, so next up we have headaches. Headaches manifest as pain in the head and neck region. Contraindications are systemic and acute vascular and pathological headaches. Typically, if someone has a vascular headache, they have a migraine, and they're not going to want you to touch them anyway. They're going to be at home in a dark place, complete silence, and no light. Indication: massage is going to relieve stress and muscle tension associated with tension headaches. And these are usually the ones that people are going to be coming to us for. They're come to us also for migraines, but not during the acute active phase of the migraine. The cause is increased muscular tension, increased blood flow within the vessels in the cranium, or an underlying pathology. Treatments include ice, pain, anti-inflammatory medications, muscle relaxers, nutritional supplements, and stress management. We have a video for you to go watch and come back and we'll continue on. Okay, so this is a picture indicating a couple of different types of headaches. The sinus headache, there's pain typically behind the brow bone and or the cheekbones. The cluster headache is pain in and around one eye. Tension is pain like a band squeezing the head. And migraine is pain, nausea, and visual changes are typical of the classic form of migraine. That gives you an idea of kind of what is going on with your clients. Okay, and then we have thoracic outlet syndrome. We go into this more specifically later on, so don't stress too much about it. And thoracic outlet syndrome manifests as paresthesia, tingling, shooting pain, weakness, numbness, a feeling of fullness or discoloration in the affected arm. Contraindications locally if the cause is other than muscular tension. Massage is indicated if to relieve the pain and other symptoms when the cause is muscle tension. So if a muscle is putting pressure on that brachial plexus, then massage is indicated to relieve that pain and other symptoms. Sometimes the thoracic outlet syndrome can be caused from the clavicle, because remember we talked about the clavicle, the nerve plexus running underneath the clavicle, between the clavicle and the first rib. Sometimes that can actually cause compression on that nerve. And if that is the case, then again, it's just like with sciatica. We can't really do anything as far as the bones. But if it is muscle tension causing the thoracic outlet syndrome symptoms, then we can help with that. The cause: tight or atrophied muscles, cervical or rib misalignment, a herniated intravertebral disc, or spondylosis. And treatments typically vary. Okay, next up with our nervous system condition is stress, something everybody's familiar with. Manifestations can include anxiety, depression, sleep disruption, or compromised immune function. Massage is indicated to reduce stress and restore homeostasis by evoking the parasympathetic response within the body, that rest and digest response. The causes of stress is various physiological and emotional stressors. Treatments include massage and other stress management techniques. Okay, so before we go on to that, down on the bottom of page 243 is talking about the body's response to prolonged stress. Is a mechanism called the General Adaptation Syndrome, or GAS. There's 3 phases of the GAS. There's the alarm reaction, that's the immediate fight or flight response when the stress has been detected. Then there's adaptation and resistance. This is when the body defends itself against the stressor, and the initial alarm symptoms subside or disappear as the stressor goes away or is accepted as non-threatening. And then finally, the exhaustion stage. This is after prolonged exposure to the stressor. The energy required for adaptation is depleted, resulting in fatigue and other symptoms of illness. Since gas was introduced to the scientific world, endless amounts of research has been performed on the neurochemistry and physiology of stress. The body responds to stress by releasing chemicals that trigger psychological changes that help the body cope with the stressors. If the body's working efficiently, then the chemicals released are completely metabolized by the body during the sympathetic nervous system response once the stressor is no longer present. However, if the body's not working properly, it inefficiently responds to the stressors by producing too much chemicals, resulting in inappropriate physiological response, such as the body not being able to respond quickly enough to a stressor, or the